Hello, welcome to GSPO's Behind the Scenes. I am Stephen Allen Fox, and I'm thrilled you're joining us for this discussion this evening. When I started GSPO back in 2002, it was with two ideas in mind. One, I wanted to create an orchestra that would bring to the concert stage great film, television, and video game music in a way that was comparable to classical concerts, that put it at that level, that it wasn't just another fundraising concert or throwaway concert, but was a concert that people could really enjoy and they could love the art of it. The second reason was I wanted to provide people a way to get away from reality, a couple hours where they could leave their stresses behind, be entertained, and have a good time. And over the last 18 years, we have been doing that, and none of that would be possible without all of you. So thank you very much for your support throughout all of these years. Now, the purpose of tonight is that we would like to take you behind the scenes, talk to you a little bit about the different concerts, how they were created, stories you may not know, and just give you a little bit of an insight into what happens behind the scenes. Very shortly, I will be joined by GSPO's music director, Victor Pesavento, as well as producer Robert Townson a little bit later on, so that we can talk about all of these great shows. I do warn you, although we are going to try to stay within about an hour or an hour and 15 minutes, we love talking about film music and we love talking about concerts. So I'm just putting that out there. When the orchestra first formed, it was under the umbrella of a civic light opera theater company in Orange County. I was the music director for that company, and we needed musicians for the pit orchestra. So we started this orchestra to pull those musicians from. My intent, though, was not to just be a pit orchestra for musicals. I wanted to be a symphonic orchestra performing, reaching the goals that I stated a little bit ago. So the first concert we did was April 6th of 2002 in the Riviera United Methodist Church in Redondo Beach. I think the orchestra had about 30 people in it, and I think the audience was about 60, and it was basically their families that came and watched it. Very humble beginning, but that was the start. We then did some musicals after that in Orange County, and we did a couple other concerts through that year. Then moving on to the Scottish Rite Cathedral in Long Beach the year after that in 2003, and then starting in 2004, we made our new home at the Warner Grand Theater, where we've been ever since, as well as some sprinkling at some other venues along the way, like the Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center, Royce Hall, Nokia, Bristol Auditorium in Bellflower, San Diego Civic Theater down in San Diego. So we've been around a little bit, but a lot of our shows have been at the Warner Grand, and it's been a great experience all of these years. Now, I really can't continue to talk any further about the orchestra and the shows that we created without bringing in the person who really has been the other half of the creative team, helping make basically all of these shows possible throughout the years. So I would like to now introduce you to our music director, Victor Pesavento. Hello, Vic.
Hey, Steve. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking in with us tonight. It's going to be a fun evening of some behind-the-scenes talk.
Yes, I think it will be. You know, I was talking about the beginnings of the orchestra and everything, and I think it's nice for people to maybe hear like how you got involved. Because I believe when I first started it, my idea came in November of 2001, and then in January of 2002 we did auditions. But somewhere in there, I think I called you, and I said, "Hey, I'm starting an orchestra. Do you want to be a part of it?"
Well, we should even take it back a little further than that, because I don't know if our audience tonight knows where we actually met, which was in undergrad university in Illinois.
Uh-huh.
We were both the same class. We went to Illinois State University, and it just so happened that Steve and I neither of us were in the marching band the first week of school, which all of our eventual friends were in. They all became friends very, very early and very fast. Steve and I were the last couple people in when classes started. So we showed up at theory class at 8 a.m. and looked around the room, and everybody was talking to each other and having a good old time. And then we sort of sat next to each other and we're like, well, they all seem to know each other. Maybe we should talk. So
Right, that's true.
We got to know each other, and eventually ended up becoming roommates for a few years in Illinois. And then Steve, you obviously moved out to California to pursue USC film scoring program.
Right.
I moved out a couple of years later, and we had kind of lost touch at that point. We, as you do, this is, I'm sure, at least some of our audience tonight is familiar with the time that there was no internet and very limited email to keep track of people like that. But we happened to get back in touch with each other, and I wasn't even playing my instrument anymore at that time. I had, when I moved out here, I didn't have any job prospects playing, so I was working for EMI Music Group, which is Capitol Records and Virgin Records. And Steve calls me up one day out of the blue and says, "Hey, I'm starting an orchestra. Do you want to be involved in it?" And I had just gotten out of school, so I was tired of rehearsals all night and homework all day. And I had a 9-to-5 job, and I went to work, and I came home, and I had a life, and I wasn't a musician. And I said to Steve, I'm not really interested in that. I kind of like where I am right now, like having my evenings free. And I said, I'll play for you. I'm a French horn player. I'll play in the section. I know you're looking for musicians, but I really don't want to get too involved in the production aspect of it, just because I don't really want to spend a lot of time doing that at this point. Well, what was it? By the time the second concert came around, things had all changed. Well, I was all in. Steve's love for the orchestra and love for what he was doing was so infectious. I had to be involved, and I believed in it.
Yeah, after that first concert, which I've got to say, I'm assuming everybody watching this right now probably was not at that first concert, but it was a lessons learned kind of concert. And then, by the time the second concert came around, many of the people watching may know it was Halloween Fright Night. It was the first Halloween Fright Night that was ever done at the Los Alamitos military base. And that was followed up 2 months later by the Holiday Pop Spectacular, also at the Los Alamitos military base, which is where the theater company we were under was performing. And, I know that Halloween concert, and it kind of stuck throughout the years. My thought for me of the Halloween concert was there's a lot of great horror music out there, and there's a lot of classical music that fits that genre. Night on a Bald Mountain and Sorcerer's Apprentice and Dance Macabre and different pieces that fit into it. Makes a very easy theme. But for me, the motivation was to get dressed up. I wanted to do a concert where I could be dressed up and be theatrical and kind of not be myself. And it was great because the orchestra followed it. Everybody dressed up. And that stuck over the years. And I thought that was kind of a cool little thing. A matter of fact, I have a little picture here. We have the picture of the actual logo that I put up. But we also, if I can find the picture.
Steve, while you're looking for the picture,
yeah.
Another neat little point about that was at that time the orchestra we were scratching at the bottom of the barrel to find musicians who would play, because obviously we didn't have a large budget. And that was the first concert that eventually he became our concertmaster of the orchestra, Paul Henning, who has been our concertmaster for 10, 12, 14 years now. That was the first concert he played in the back of the second violin section.
Yeah, he played in the back of the second violin section, and sometime during the next year, he started to help bring in string players for the orchestra, and then eventually that...
Because he had more contacts.
Right, and that eventually evolved into him being concertmaster. But right now, there's a picture on screen of the horn section from one of the Holiday Fright Nights, all dressed in Scooby-Doo characters. And for people that want to know, in the green shirt, Shaggy, that's actually Vic. So, with hair.
And Daphne is my wife, Emily, who's also a horn player.
Right. Yeah, so a lot of fun. And you can see Scooby is a balloon that is hovering behind him right there. So we had a lot of fun. But then, besides that year was also the first Holiday Pop Spectacular that we had ever done. And I don't remember the first one. I'm not sure it had a lot of film music in the very first one.
Yeah, I don't remember. It was so long ago.
At that time, there wasn't a lot of film music that was arranged for concert pieces that was holiday film music. You probably had, I don't know much of anything. I don't even think It's a Wonderful Life. That suite wasn't even created back then.
No, that wasn't. No.
That actually, I think that a lot, and some of them, have all been in the last 10 years or so. So it's, yeah, that first concert probably didn't have a lot of film music on it. But, since then, obviously, we've done a lot of film music on our holiday concerts. And we had Shoshana Bean. I've got a picture of her up singing Let It Go a few years ago, the Broadway star, which was, I thought, a great moment to have. And it was funny because, she's the epitome of professional. We're in the middle of the rehearsal, and as what happens, the reason you rehearse, there were a couple lyrics in there that she was kind of tongue-tied on, and it was going around, and finally she just put her arms up in the air, smiled, and goes, "Don't worry about it, I'll be fine." And she walks off the stage, and then comes out in the concert and nails it, and then came up to me afterwards and said, "Well, I knew I had to get it right. Every little girl in that audience was going to be singing along with me, so even they would have known if I was wrong." But it was an example of just true professionals. They make it work, and she was one of those.
Yeah. Another little fun story about the costumes for the holiday concert. It was sort of a tradition for the horn section to dress up as a themed section. So one year we did all Star Trek costumes, and luckily I didn't have to wear the red shirt. And one year we did the Scooby-Doo, and another year we did Wizard of Oz, where I was the Tin Man, and John Petring, our principal horn, actually rented a full-on lion suit and played the concert in a lion suit with a prosthetic mask on his face. But one of the concerts, it became sort of a competition between the horn section and the percussion section. And one year they decided to dress up as Blue Man Group, of course, because they're percussionists. But they didn't really look into the right kind of body paint, so they just got blue latex paint, and it wasn't good. By intermission of the concert, they were pulling the paint off their body because they couldn't breathe through it.
Right. Well, talking about mistakes with Halloween costumes, I wanted to dress like Darth Vader when we did Imperial March, the mask and everything. And if everybody's seen the Darth Vader mask before, there's plexiglass right across the eyes, and it's all enclosed. Well, I think maybe 30 seconds into it, the glass had completely fogged up. I couldn't see the musicians. I couldn't see the music. And the rest of it, I'm just conducting, not seeing anybody. And when I got done, I turned around and kind of stumbled off stage and realized that's not what you wear while you're trying to conduct a concert. I think because of all the film music that we've put into the Halloween concerts and the holiday concerts, I think one thing that people might wonder is, like, where do we find this music? If it's not available to buy and it's not in the rental libraries, I think we could give some good examples here of where, well, Elf, for instance, for John Debney's Elf, that came to creation because you created the arrangement. And, we have to get the permissions. We have to, get licensing if we're going to show some video or some still images with it.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. That's one of the most difficult things about running an orchestra that plays contemporary music is licensing and rights and all of that kind of stuff that goes along with it. The film music, especially, the studios aren't set up they don't have the infrastructure or the care to allow their music to be performed. It's a lot of times it's really jumping through hoops and cutting through a lot of red tape. And of course, it's really who that can actually answer your email or your request or whatever. But they don't. It doesn't always work. Sometimes it's really difficult to get it. And I think that was alluding to your point of the Christmas music or holiday music. There just wasn't any music available out there that if you could create it yourself, that's one thing. But I mean, you're supposed to get permission for that as well. But now since then, a lot of stuff has come out. So many great holiday movies have come out with great music. The Home Alone stuff, of course, is classic now.
Right.
Yeah. And Elf, of course, as well.
Yeah. And I mean, there's been many times that we've had to actually get the composers involved, not just in getting master material to use to create the arrangements, but to help us do the phone calls, be the foot in the door to get a director or a producer or the production company to actually say, "Oh, this is a serious question that they're asking here."
Well, and to that point, just because a composer is composed their original music for a movie, a lot of people don't realize that they have no rights to it. Usually the studio owns it. It's a work for hire. Sometimes they get a little bit of rights to it, but most of the time the studio owns it. And to that point, we've actually had composers been denied from their studio the right to perform their own music in concert.
Right.
When it went that way, which is unfortunate, because why?
Right.
But yeah, anyway.
Well, and that's what happens. I mean, over the years, there's been a handful of people that will contact us. Hey, I have this great concert idea. What do you think? And the biggest hurdle is clearance. You might not be able to get permission to do everything that you're wanting to do. So what are you going to do instead of that? And I think that's one of the things that sometimes dictates what the concerts are going to be. It's not just what do we want a theme to be, or what do we want the music to be. It's what can we get.
So, and on that note, where in your agenda do you talk about how we come up with the themes and all of that? Is now a good time to talk about that?
Yeah, I think that's great.
So when Steve and I sit down and we plan out our programs for a season, or actually we have a little black book, if you will, of themes that we want to do, that we've taken notes down on over the years, and say, oh, we want to do this concert, we want to do this concert. And a lot of times what we try to do is we try to tell a story with the concert. We try to program it in such a way where there's not, maybe it's not necessarily a thread that goes through the whole concert, but when the concert's over, the audience feels like they've gone on a journey, gone on a ride. There's ups, there's downs, similar to telling a story or a movie, a three act movie. It's cliched to say that there's act one, and this happens in act one, and this happens in act two, and this happens in act three, but it works for a reason. It's a very good formula. And we try to do that with every one of our concerts, regardless of the subject matter. And do you agree, Steve?
Well, I actually think that that's one of the things that helps kind of make us unique in some ways, is that, if you go to a classical symphony orchestra concert, each piece of music typically is longer, and the dramatic flow is dictated by the composer who wrote that piece of music. And what the conductor's doing is trying to pick a couple other pieces that are typically also longer. Maybe they do an overture at the beginning that's 7 or 8 minutes, but the rest of them are probably 15, 20, 30 minutes, 40 minutes long. And so it's not as much about the dramatic flow as it is a segment that has its own dramatic flow. When you're doing a concert like we do, where pieces are somewhere between 3 and 8 minutes most of the time, you have to think about where do we want the first 15 to 20 minutes go, and then how do we end the first half, and then how's the second half start, and what's the flow of that going to be? And you're right. And sometimes the flow, sometimes you decide, everybody would probably think, well, the beginning's got to be something that gets your attention, and the ending's got to be something that just leaves you with a wow. But sometimes the theme calls for something different, where maybe the beginning is supposed to draw people in a way that's more like, wow, I didn't expect this. Or maybe the ending is supposed to leave them like a silent night at the end of a holiday concert that's leaving them more nostalgic and in a certain mood. Not that you do that every time, but there's a creative choice.
We did that one at least once or twice. We ended a holiday concert with the Mannheim Steamroller still a knocked.
Right.
We brought the lights down really low, and it was a very intimate scene, almost like candlelight. And it was so powerful at the end of the concert to end on that just quiet note.
Well, it's similar to, like, if you watch Phantom of the Opera, the musical, if you watch the musical Jesus Christ Superstar, not including the little add-on they do at the end, but the musical proper ends very quiet. And I know the storyline goes that way, but sometimes the theme to a concert should also go that way. And for me, that's actually when I sometimes feel the most creative juices flowing in trying to decide how to put a concert together, is when I know that's the kind of ending it has to have, because now you have to find the right piece of music to make that happen. And
I mean, it's easy to say play the loudest thing the last thing you play.
Right. And
that's easy.
And there's a lot of times where that is the right thing to do.
The right thing to do.
But there are certain moments where you just sit there going, no, that's not the right thing this time. Maybe that's the end. And I think what we typically do is, if we know we're going to end the concert that way, then we'll probably end the second half with that really loud piece. so that as
In the first half, you mean?
yeah, what did I say? The second half.
You said second
Yeah,
half.
you know what I meant. Yeah, we end the first half
Yeah.
with that big bombastic piece, make them want to come back for the second half, and then set them up for that dramatic low, which almost acts like a high
Right.
at the end of the show.
Right.
Now,
Yeah, it's all about peaks and valleys. It's all about an emotional roller coaster, emotional ride through the music.
right now, while we talk about how we put them together, I've got a little slideshow playing that's got poster from Pops for Pop, if you remember that show, Father's Day concert with Sam Spence, which
Oh,
I have a
yeah.
picture of him that I'll show everybody. Sam Spence, the writer of the NFL Films music, and
You hear it all the time in commercials and
and
everything. It is amazing.
nobody knew who wrote it, and he actually flew here from Germany to be a part of the concert so that
And conduct
he could conduct his suite from NFL Films, which was fun. So we had that concert, the Superheroes and Beyond concert, which actually
Yep.
we collaborated on that, as well as a few other concerts with George Edwards, the graphic artist who created the poster
Right.
for that concert. He created the poster for video games soundtracks.
And also, I
and
believe
Out of This
he did a
World,
lot
which is
of-
on the screen now, the sci-fi concert.
He did a lot of graphics, media to be played while we were performing as well.
Right.
Stuff that went tied in with some of the music and some of the themes that he had developed, visual themes.
Right, very artistic, graphic arts kind of stuff. But yeah, I think back to that Superheroes and Beyond, we had some different guests for that concert that I thought was a lot of fun. And then just for fun, I put in there one of the posters from the Holiday Pops that people may never have seen. It's the GSPO logo with the Santa hat on it and the ornaments hanging off the music notes. We haven't used it in years, but I thought it might be nice.
I like that one.
Might be nice
It's
for everybody to
cute.
see. Now, I think when we created the dramatic flow for those concerts, there was something that was always a little bit different in that era of our concerts, where the themes, I don't know, I almost think of it like I don't want to call it cartoonish because it wasn't cartoon music and it wasn't animated and stuff like that, but it was very kid friendly. Although our shows are still family friendly, but the themes were kind of this thread where all the music that was picked automatically connected.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I think even before we worked with George, we did a concert called not Out of This World. It was the Fairy Tale concert. Do you remember what that one was called?
Fairy Tales and Other Legends or something like that. Fairy.
Yeah, It was like storybook fairy tales, and we did things from like Princess Bride, and we did some Robin Hood and some different things. I really liked that show. I thought that one was a fun one, a very, very kid friendly one.
Now,
musically.
Do you remember? Didn't we made a story? I think we made a fake storybook with that and had a narrative. We had
did,
somebody.
yeah.
Was it Chase Masterson that hosted it?
Yes, I believe so.
I think Chase Masterson
from Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
One of the actresses that was on Star Trek Deep Space Nine came, and we actually had an opportunity. She was putting together. She wanted to do a jazz CD. Jazz record. So Steve and I at the time were working with a big band, a local big band, and through one of the players in the big band, she knew him, and she hired him to do all of the arrangements for her. And then we all went into the studio and recorded this CD for her. And then I think we actually had her come and do 2 or 3 things. I think she did Night Before Christmas one time.
Yeah, she did.
With us narrating.
Yeah.
And then we came up with a script for this. We had a couple people helping us at the time. A couple, Rob and Devette, and they were helping us come up with some sort of like story type things to weave into the music. And it was nice.
Now there's a question I want to get to here. Samoad Lover 317. How do you two resolve when you disagree on the concert playlist or theme or ending songs?
We never disagree.
Yeah,
It's music.
well,
It's always right.
Yeah, I think. Yes, I agree. But I have something else to add to that. When you've known somebody for I think 27 years, and you have very similar tastes and philosophies and thoughts on things, it honestly is very rare that we disagree on something. And typically, if we do, one or the other is able to explain why they think it should be that way, and either the other person says, you're right, or they put something back that says, but wait a minute, what about this? And the other person says, I didn't think of that. And then I wouldn't call it a compromise because we're not disagreeing, but an alternate solution that brings it all together typically comes from that.
Well, and not only that, oftentimes from those minor, we've never really had any major conflicts like that, but out of those minor conflicts, sometimes what actually comes out of that is better than what either of us wanted in the initial draft.
Right.
So when we put our heads together and say, Steve will send me something and say, I'm thinking this might be a good order to start with. And I'll say, I don't really like something about that. And he'll say, well, what about this? And then eventually what ends up happening is like, oh yeah, that's it. That's what it should have been from the beginning. And it's like, at that point, everything becomes clear for it, even though we both thought we had the right thing first. So it's really a collaborative effort on that.
It is. And I think both of us go into it too with an idea that we're trying to create the best experience we can for the audience. And it's not just a personal toot my horn, I want it to be my way kind of thing. So we collaborate and we think about the audience. And sometimes we even ask other people, hey, what do you think about doing this kind of a thing? And we get input from other people. Now, of these concerts, the Spoonful of Sherman, probably, one of the great, like from the ground up building concerts that have been put together, where you and Jonathan Hughes pretty much arranged almost everything that's on the concert.
Yeah.
And
we got that contact through a composer, a legendary composer who we had done a concert with the prior year, named Stu Phillips. And we throw that name out there. Some of you might not know who that is. Stu Phillips did the original music for Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers. We're talking about the old school ones, not the remakes of them. The ones from the the 60s or 70s or something. I'm not sure about the years. And then we did a whole concert tribute to him, which ultimately, I'm sure we'll touch on this in a few minutes, but ultimately led to Steve and I deciding we wanted to do a series of composer showcases, where instead of doing a collage concert, we really wanted to feature the music of one composer or something like that. And so,
as a matter of fact, if they look on the screen right now, I just put up, not that we have to talk about these, but 4 of them other than the Sherman Brothers. You had Elmer Bernstein, Jerry Goldsmith, John Williams, Alan Silvestri. Those are 4 of the big ones that we've done. And then we also did a collage greatest composer concert where it was a variety of great composers. But those 4 were 4 of the individual ones, and then obviously the Sherman Brothers as well.
Right. And the Sherman Brothers, we actually teased during the Goldsmith concert. We did a little Sherman Brothers medley because it was the concert directly preceding that. But putting that concert together was really, really special because Richard and Robert Sherman are 2 of the most legendary songwriters in American history. They've written all the songs from Mary Poppins, Winnie the Pooh, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, everything that you remember from Disney, and all the Disney theme park stuff that Walt had them write. The Epcot theme, the Tiki Room, all of that stuff. They composed all that. And so when Stu was obviously a good friend of Richard's, and Stu said, do you guys want to do a concert with Richard Sherman? And we're like, of course, yeah, but how is that going to happen? Because again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, you can't just pick music up off the ground and play it. If it's not available, it's really hard to get, especially Disney. Disney is very, very controlling over their music. They have very strict rules about how much music you can play of Disney production stuff on a concert and this and that. So we decided, well, first of all, we went to Disney and said, we want to do this. We have this idea. Can you help us? And we had a very good contact in the music licensing department over at Disney. He was very helpful to us over the years. And he basically gave us carte blanche to do anything. And so far as even providing all of the original scores from Mary Poppins, all the original stuff from the original movie that we could use to do our new arrangements. So Jonathan Hughes, who's our pianist in the orchestra, and I spent about a year, I would say, coming up along with Richard. Our first meeting with Richard, do you remember? We went to Stu's house and we met in Stu's pool house, and we sat around the piano and came up with a bunch of ideas and different songs that we wanted to do.
And I remember one of them. It might have been Richard, maybe it was Stu's. I think it was Stu. He said the conversation was coming to an end, and we're all sitting around, in couches around this dining room table, and he goes, I don't mean to bring up the elephant in the room, but there's a song we haven't talked about, but I'm not sure we should. And Richard goes, do you mean this one? And he gets up and walks to the piano and starts playing and singing It's a Small World. And I'm just sitting there like with my jaw on the floor going,
yeah,
is this really happening right now? Yeah. Little did we know, he'd end up doing that with us in the concert as well, which was great.
Both concerts, yep. Yeah.
And I just want to add that when you were talking about Stu asking if he wanted to do a concert with Richard, that night that we did the Stu concert, Paul comes up to me, the concertmaster, Paul Henning, and says, did you know Richard Sherman's here? And I'm like, what? I had no idea. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, Richard Sherman's here. I mean, we didn't know that he was best friends with Stu Phillips and everything. And then obviously
he just came to watch the concert.
He just came to watch the concert. And then a little bit later, Stu calls us, hey, what do you think about doing a concert for Richard Sherman? And it's like, just like a story we're going to tell in a few minutes and meeting the next person that's going to be joining us in a few minutes. It's one of those moments where you go, where did this come from? It's like, this is the way it works. But anyways, I had a picture at one point. If everybody on the screen right now is the cast that sang in the Sherman, in A Spoonful of Sherman. Richard Sherman's in the middle. The cast is on either side of him. Vic is on the far left. Our executive director at the time, Linda Grimes, is there next to me. And then on the far right is Jonathan Hughes, the other arranger of all the music and our piano player in the orchestra. So I thought it'd be nice for everybody to see him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, an amazing concert. We've done it twice, and I hope that we do it many more times and maybe take it on tour and get this thing going around the world. Now, besides this, we've also done other things related to Disney. We did the West Coast premiere of Disney in Concert Tale as Old as Time, which actually does not exist anymore because it was totally taken apart and rebuilt into a totally different concert that is now tourable.
Steve,
yeah.
So just so everyone's aware of how this works is when Steve talks about a concert like that being taken apart, what they mean is as Steve and I have created concerts, from beginning to end with we're going to play this song here, this piece here, this movie here, this and that. Disney has done that with their own concerts where they create a specific concert with video all the way through. So when Steve says they've taken it apart, they decided they didn't like the dramatic flow of some of it and they wanted to change some of it. So they pulled pieces out and put different pieces in its place and just sort of rearranged it, ever trying to make it the best that it could be.
Right. And so that was one concert. And then we also at one point did the Silly Symphonies, which is another concert that's actually not performed very often, but it's also a part of the Disney concert library. I think six different symphonies, silly symphonies, are what we performed in that one, maybe 7.
Remind everybody what those are, because I don't know if that's commonly known by the name, because it's the skeleton dance and
right.
It was Duckling and all that.
It was 10 years worth of animated shorts that Disney had his animators create prior to creating the first animated feature. And it was his experimental stage in figuring out how to get animation to the level he wanted it to be for a major motion picture. So that all of the things that were eventually used in Disney feature films that made their animation look so incredible, those were practiced and developed during those 10 years to eventually reach. And then once they finished that and they started making the major motion pictures, they didn't make any more Silly Symphonies. That was the end of it. But they all had phenomenal music that was written very classical oriented in things. So it was some pretty cool stuff. And the last 2 things before we bring on our next guest I just wanted to throw out there is we have the video game soundtracks concerts that we did twice, I think, and then we tried to do it a third time. Maybe we've done it 3 times. I can't remember.
Well, and then also we've performed as a guest orchestra for Video Games Live at Comic-Con in San Diego.
Yeah.
And also at Nokia Theater, or what I don't know what it's called now here in LA.
Microsoft.
Microsoft, yeah.
Now,
okay.
Now, one thing that's different, I feel that makes our video game soundtracks concerts stand out a little bit different than Video Games Live or the Final Fantasy concert and things like that is we do try to pick video game music that's popular, but we also try to talk with some of the composers and do research into great video game music that people may not even realize exists. And then we still put it together in that dramatic flow fashion. We don't just say, well, these are all popular games, so that's what we're going to play, and we just save the most popular for the end. We still try to listen to the music and figure out a flow like we usually do. And we tried to do one a couple of years ago, and for various different reasons, it just wasn't possible. And that concert series is one that we're talking about bringing back once COVID-19 is behind us and we can start producing again. And then the last one I wanted to mention was the music from the Star Wars universe, which I'm a little bit proud of that we had come up with that idea when we did, because this was probably almost 10 years ago that we had the idea to create a Star Wars concert that wasn't just John Williams' film music. And
yeah, I think it was about 6-7 years ago.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
But to have the music that was written for the book Shadow of the Empire, which actually was instigated and put together and produced by Robert Townson, and then also the video games for Star Wars, and then now you've got the television shows, the cartoons. We had a couple fan films that were thrown in there, and that's another concert that we actually are in talks with Disney, since they own that now, trying to bring back, but make it even bigger with video and make it a full-on extravaganza. So that's another one that we're looking at for the future. Which I think
I think that's a good segue, isn't it?
I think it's a great segue to go into the next part of our evening. We did the Goldsmith Greatest Composer Series concert back in 2012, and at that concert happened to be Robert Townsson. As I'm walking into the reception after the concert, which the reception was across the street, Robert Townsson happened to be walking out, and it probably was 20 seconds at most. He and I shook hands and went on our way, and then lo and behold, he ended up contacting us, and from there, I think I want to then bring him in to talk about this, because I think he says it best, that the rest of that story and how this relationship started. So I'm very happy to be able to bring into the conversation, incredible, over 30 years of producing film score soundtracks, 10, 13, 15 years of creating concerts of film music around the world, has really been a main part of creating the way film music festivals happen in other countries and how prestigious they are. And we're lucky to have him here with us. And so here I'm going to bring in Robert Townsson into the conversation. Hello, Robert.
Hello, Steve. Hello, Vic. Steve. Hello, everyone. Happy holidays. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Beautiful Christmas tree.
Beautiful Christmas tree. Thank you. Yeah, a little bit better than when we practiced this the other day, everybody. I had a green screen behind me, and in the space here between my headset and was the green screen halo. We decided that was not the way to go. So
John, it's all authentic. It's all real. Authentic.
Yeah, so thank you for being here. And why don't you continue that story of we met at the end of the Jerry Goldsmith concert, and then.
Yeah, absolutely. I ran to the venue. I ran to the venue. I was to rush home, but I wanted to just congratulate you on the concert and pass along my regards, even though I only had a minute and happened to it was somehow magically synchronized that I think arriving to enter the venue just as I was there hopefully find you if I was to go inside, but you were right at the door, and so we were able to shake hands, and I was able to extend my compliments on the Goldsmith show, and then be on my way. And so that was the entirety of our relationship, essentially, before we started working together. The only time we ever met and spoke in person. And then the reality is, or the events that really led to it all coming together was I was on my way back to Los Angeles from I think Krakow, from the Krakow Film Music Festival. in, I guess it would have been 2012. And I had been on that trip talking with that festival and also other international festivals who were attending the Krakow Festival, but who I work with in Tenerife and other cities, about the idea of presenting a special show to celebrate the Varese Sarabande 35th anniversary. Varese, of course, was the label I produced at for so many years, decades, and it was on the plane ride home where I was realizing, okay, this is all great. We'll have all of these, international celebrations of the history of film music through Varese Sarabande. But as I have so many of my album ideas, concert ideas, just sitting on a plane staring out the window, and all of a sudden I had this epiphany. It occurred to me, it's like, wait a minute, we've got to celebrate Varese in Los Angeles. I mean, of course, it'll be great to celebrate all over the world, but I mean, not everyone, but of course, so many of the composers and all my great friends live in Los Angeles, and how cool that would be to have a local celebration of great film music. And so, literally, the night I got home from flying Poland to Los Angeles, 20-hour travel day or whatnot, that night I wrote to you, Steve, and just pitched the idea. Somehow I had your email address or whatever, and I just said, just a thought, but would you have any interest in presenting next year? 2013 will be the 35th anniversary of Varese Sarabande Records, and I was thinking about doing a concert to celebrate the great music and composers who have been part of that history. And I think it was maybe 5 minutes before I heard back from you.
Yeah.
It was like one of those, and I think if I could have seen you, your jaw was on the floor. And you were absolutely on board. The concept, and wanted to talk more about it, and of course, then we just jumped into it and started having more conversations and trading emails and phone calls and whatnot. And I was so we were like roughing in the whole concept of what it could be, and then finally, after not too long, but I sent you a Word file or something of the first draft of my program, and I had mentioned, well, maybe I'll bring a few composers too. It would be cool to, have some of my composer friends there to conduct a piece of theirs, or to, introduce it, or whatever, and so then, and you were, supportive of that idea. So I did start making some calls and checking in with some guys, and that it blossomed in a way that was historic and completely unprecedented. I mean, unprecedented up to with the exception of back in 1963 in Los Angeles at the Hollywood Bowl, there was a concert to end all concerts where it involved Alfred Newman, Alex North, Bernard Herrmann, Max Steiner was there. Franz Waxman, incredible group of all of the legendary master composers of the Golden Age who were still, around and alive and working at that time, and so they were all there. I mean, what it would have been like to have been part of that history and to have been at that show. But anyway, that in some ways was the inspiration for what started as my introducing the concept of, well, what if I bring a few composers to, let's really swing for the fences here. Let's do a modern day incarnation of what that show was back in 1963. Mm-hmm. So So the Why Don't I Bring a Few Composers ultimately turned into, Hans Zimmer was there and on piano, Danny Elfman was there, John Powell was there, Brian Tyler was there, Michael Giacchino was there, Diego Navarro from Tenerife. I mean, we had just so many people. I mean, it was like the final bow was a lineup from stage left to stage right, to the degree where you couldn't have squeezed in another person. And what a night that was! I mean, we had like 30 composers sharing 2 dressing rooms.
Yeah, that's true. There was the dressing rooms were full that night.
Yeah. I mean, the list on the dressing room door, there was like dressing room 1 and dressing room 2, and it was just like, a list of a dozen people on each dressing room door, and showing who would be in what room. But it was just hilarious to even see that. I wish we had a photo of those doors, because that was pretty funny.
I remember when we were trying to figure out how to put everybody together. We're like, well, are these, I mean, is a Hans Zimmer okay to share a dressing room with like 5 other people? And are they, because the Warner Grand only has the 4 small dressing rooms and then the 2 large rooms, and one large room is also for the orchestra men, and one large dressing room is for the orchestra women. And then any choir has to go down the street, typically to the Grand Vision Foundation.
I think we actually removed the orchestra that night too.
We needed the orchestra's room.
Yeah.
Did we have them at Grand Vision as well?
I think so.
You're right, because the choir, we set up the back room of Grand Vision for the choir to have a green room, which is typically the Grand Vision storage room. And then the front area was, I mean, really the front area was where they all warmed up. The back room was just where the choir could leave their personal belongings. But I mean, it was all good though. I mean, it was crazy, but that was all good.
It all worked. Yeah, it was totally crazy, but it all worked, and that was the important thing. And we were also, if you remember, I mean, it was such a crazy night, because then even after the concert, I mean, the concert was like this, this massive event, but we had an art show going on as well, or an art exhibition of original Bob Peak paintings and Matthew Peak paintings going on at the party venue for the after party. So we had a huge art exhibition going on, both prior to the concert and then afterwards. And I mean, the whole thing was just again, a local version of what I've been doing internationally for so many years. I actually started producing film music concerts in the mid 1990s, when I was doing so much recording with the Royal Scottish National Orchestra. And while I was traveling to Glasgow 2 or 3 times a year with Jerry Goldsmith and Elmer Bernstein and Joel McNeely and John Debney, the orchestra kind of quickly asked if, when I was in town with these legends, would I be interested in starting to produce film music concerts with them as well? And I, of course, said yes. And, off I went into that world. And, and film music is my life. It's, it's such a passion for me. And really kind of spurring it all, or firing it all, is a fervent belief that I have that, and the reality is the entirety of the film music repertoire has essentially been ignored by the concert world. I mean, even things that you cannot believe have never been played in concert have never been played in concert. And then on top of that, everything else. So there has been such a dereliction of acknowledging and welcoming great film music into the concert world, where we are still at the very beginning of changing that.
Right.
And that's been the impetus behind my doing what I do, and also just made the connection of what you guys do with the GSPO, and building a collaboration between us. It made it, I think, inevitable.
Well, and I think that, after, talking about that collaboration, after you Facebook messaged me, and I still remember going to my wife and just being like, read this. Am I reading this right? and she was like, yeah. And I don't even know. I think I might have texted Vic. I don't think I let anybody else. I texted you back before I'd even let the board know that we're now involved in this big thing. But I remember how you wanted to do that concert, and then when Vic and I were talking about concerts for that season, it just all of a sudden became a reality that as we were planning our ideas and then talking more with you, all 4 concerts for that year could have Varese involved, and that's what ended up happening. It was a season celebration. Starting with the was Alan Silvestri, right?
Yeah, we started with Silvestri.
Yeah.
And then came the big, the principal Varese 35th Gala in May of 2013.
Right.
And then the Varese 35th Anniversary Halloween Gala in October. And then what completely blows my mind, because you've got this like level of difficulty off the chart of the Halloween Gala. And then just a few weeks later, we build the Varese Saraband 35th Anniversary Christmas concert, and put that together in a way that had never been done before, with the entire first half devoted to Bernard Herrmann's A Christmas Carol and adapting that for the stage in a way that had never been done before. And that in so many ways, again, is such a hallmark of the way I approach concerts, because it's doing stuff that should have been done decades ago.
Right.
And we're still in the larval state of bringing music that should be repertoire and introducing it into the repertoire.
Right. Yeah, and I've got the picture right now of the love duet on the screen.
Oh my goodness, it was so beautiful. I mean, ravishing. We had amazing soloists. Mary Lou Basaraba, great choir director of the GSPO choir, and the way she connected us with all these incredible soloists to take the acting and singing roles of A Christmas Carol. And it's just one of my great memories. It's such a beautiful piece.
Everyone should know as well that we weren't planning on going to the lengths that we went to with that. We were planning on performing it more as an in-concert version, not a theatrical performance. But when she started sharing some of the ideas that she had with staging and costumes and this and that, we were like, hey, we had no idea we could even do it that well, and so she deserves all the credit on coming up with all of that sort of stuff, and really she took the bull by the horns and just rode it all the way through to New Year's.
Well, and that started, was that a radio show originally?
No, it was a television show.
It was a television show.
A major television special. It actually ran for 3 years. It was restaged 3 years in a row, 54, 55, and 56. It premiered as part of the CBS Shower of Stars. But it was a musical version of A Christmas Carol with music by Bernard Herrmann.
Yeah.
And lyrics by Maxwell Anderson. And it was Frederick March and Basil Rathbone. Just an amazing production, and a huge hit back then, but then was completely kind of lost and forgotten, and has never been played since. And so we brought something back that had, the last time a musician had seen any of those notes in front of them was 1956.
Right.
So just so important, and then of course the other thing we brought, premiered in the Christmas concert that year was a Charlie Brown Christmas.
Right.
Another piece that it's like, how does this not exist for symphony orchestra? I mean, the iconic, beloved Christmas special of all time, and so my idea was, all right, let's create a new Charlie Brown Christmas suite. And reached out to Bill Ross, who is Mr. Christmas, William Ross, the great composer of so many incredible scores, and has arranged countless Christmas albums for everyone under the sun.
And he's besides that, he also has conducted a couple other things on our holiday concerts, right, Vic? Yeah.
Yeah, so not to sidetrack the conversation of the Charlie Brown, we'll get right back to that, but the Disney Christmas Carol, the Disney version of it that came out. He was the main orchestrator for Alan Silvestri, the composer on that. And there's a famous, now legendary Christmas. It's called "God Bless Us, Everyone." I guess it's not really Christmas as it is just a holiday piece, a very huge choir piece, and I believe it was Bocelli that sang it on the original soundtrack.
Yeah.
William Ross did that arrangement of it for the movie, and we've come to perform that almost every year on our holiday concerts because it's such a great piece, and he has come and conducted that for us. But anyway, back to Charlie Brown.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So my idea of bringing Charlie Brown was, of course, step one, reach out to Bill Ross, and then we came up with the approach of creating it as a Charlie Brown Christmas suite for flute, orchestra, and choir, as a special solo piece for Sarah Andon, who now the GSPO principal flutist, and he arranged it for her, opening with "Christmas Time Is Here," and then going into a whole kind of epic jazz improv on the skating theme, with jazz flute and then an a cappella introduction of "Oh Christmas Tree," then being joined by the choir and orchestra, and then a full flute, orchestra, and choir reprise of "Christmas Time Is Here" for the grand finale of the suite. Just absolute classic. And I think both of those pieces, I think Charlie Brown Christmas and a Christmas Carol, are one day destined to be repertoire pieces performed. Because another thing is, another big part of the history of film music in concert is, even though at this point, really for so many years, every orchestra in the world has done a Christmas concert. Mm-hmm. And they're really a variation of one or two programs between all of the orchestras in the world doing their Christmas concerts, where even the orchestras realize they are tired programs. And so it's a whole genre in need of refurbishment and refreshment, and this is the way to do it.
Right. Yeah. Pretty amazing. And
and all of these concerts, I love taking advantage of that opportunity to add to the repertoire, build repertoire, and do new pieces. When you were talking about different ways of ending a concert, do you go big or do you go small? Earlier in the program, it reminded me of trying to come up with an encore piece to the May Gala of the Varese Sarabande 35th anniversary, where throughout the show we had so many fireworks on stage. It was like one firework after another, with Zimmer and Elfman and Tyler and Giacchino. We had Star Trek. The orchestra, choir, just going crazy. And then I thought, and plus we had, in the program, there was music by composers who were no longer with us, and so we had Goldsmith and Roja and these amazing pieces. Now, with all of those composers in attendance and all of that music having been part of the main program, what possibly can stand up to all of that and be a worthy encore to a show like that? And so I was really racking my brain, because it didn't seem like just even another big piece, or anything I was thinking of still didn't feel right. And then I came up with the approach of, let's not go big, but let's make it the emotional high of the concert and come up with something that everyone shares a memory of. Truly everyone, something that really unites the audience, because it's something that I could count on everyone having seen it and experienced the film and the music at some point in their lives, and that this could take them back to that memory. And so I felt I came up with it in making the encore piece to that show be Elmer Bernstein's "To Kill a Mockingbird," and that gave my good friend Austin Wintory an opportunity of being part of the show, which he would not have been part of as a composer at the time, because it's a tough room with that number of composers in the wings there. but I needed an arrangement, and he loved the opportunity of being able to do a special arrangement of Elmer's music again for flute and orchestra. Flute is such a vital. It's the principal voice in the score anyway. And so Sarah Andon got a special piece from that concert as well, with Austin's arrangement of Elmer's To Kill a Mockingbird. And that was a beautiful encore to the show that, again, took us all to extraordinary heights, but then brought us all back down to earth together and just had a quiet, intimate memory that everyone shared. It was so beautiful.
Well, out of all those concerts, I mean, obviously, incredible moments and, memories to last a lifetime. Two memories stand out in my mind from those Varese concerts that year. One was the Halloween concert. It's kind of a double thing here. Is Christopher Young like jumping onto stage at the end of the concert when Ghost Rider was finished and like giving everybody hugs and bowing down to Dave Lombardo. And Dave Lombardo was my part B of that memory. Was as I was conducting Ghost Rider at one point, I looked over and I'm like, there's a heavy metal band on the side of the stage with Dave Lombardo pounding away. I'm like, I don't think this ever would have gone through my mind as something that I would have ever thought would happen. So that's one coupled memory. The other memory.
Just before we move on to the next one, just a comment on the big Ghost Rider finale is talk about taking it to the biggest possible finale of a concert, where we had the full Golden State Pops Orchestra and choir and a heavy metal band going absolutely, through the roof, truly blowing the roof off the old Warner Grand Theater at the end of that piece. And also, for some reason, my mind went to, while that was happening, realizing that, of course, beautiful Colette Delarue, Georges Delarue's widow, was in the audience because she was there to be supportive and to hear Something Wicked This Way Comes of Georges perform. But as Dave and Dave Lombardo and the heavy metal band are just knocking the place down,
bringing generations together.
Exactly.
I want to share a memory from one of those concerts that the audience probably had no idea happened or even could probably sense it. But so when we put together these shows, especially with a lot of guests, rehearsal time is at a premium. Every guest wants more time to rehearse their part of it. And it's, we have with the confines of our budgets, we have very limited rehearsal time to begin with. And then when you get on a podium and you're conducting, the time goes by twice as fast as what you think it does when you're sitting there waiting to go on. But for the 35th concert, the big anniversary concert that we did in May, one of the main guests was Hans Zimmer. And when Hans wants a little more time, you give Hans a little more time. So what Hans did with his time was taught the orchestra the theme to his yet unreleased movie, the Superman.
Man of Steel.
I don't remember what the
Man of Steel.
Okay, yeah. So he's playing chords on the piano and saying, okay, we're going to do something like this. And took about 20 minutes and had the orchestra improvise a whole interlude based on this new theme that he wrote for this movie. So we were playing Driving Miss Daisy, one of his earlier scores, which is just a masterpiece score for everything. And then he's like, when we get to this point of the score, we're gonna go into this jam session, and we're just gonna jam. So we did. We jammed
in the middle of the Driving Miss Daisy suite with premiere of Man of Steel.
The orchestra had no music in front of them. They had never heard any of this music before because the movie wasn't even out yet. And we're trying to. He's like, yeah, do something like this. And he had a solo violin on the front of the stage that one of his soloists for the piece.
Anne-Marie Calhoun.
Right. Yeah, Anne-Marie, and she came out, and Hans is like, just watch her. She'll tell you guys how to do it. And during the concert, so it was just all improvisatory. And then at the end, somebody gave some kind of signal, and we went back to Driving Miss Daisy and finished the music as it was written.
And to take that story a step further, it was supposed to be an open vamp solo section for all the soloists that he brought, just vamping on the chord progression of Driving Miss Daisy, but he came up with this other idea. And the way I found out about the idea is before the dress rehearsal, I'm coming out of my dressing room, and Robert says, Steve, come here, come here. And I go into one of the other dressing rooms. He goes, I'd like to introduce you to Hans Zimmer. And Hans Zimmer's standing there. He shakes my hand. He's surrounded by his entourage. A couple of them are carrying big stacks of sheet music. And I'm looking, going, what is that for? And he holds out his hand and he goes, nice to meet you. And now I'm going to ruin your day. And I'm like, okay. And he goes, remember how we were going to do an open vamp solo section? And I go, yes, we've practiced it. And he goes, we're not doing that anymore. Now we're going to do a jam session on the Man of Steel theme. And as he starts to talk about his idea, he starts to realize that we're not going to hand any music out. We're just going to teach them by rote, and we're going to jam on it. And as he starts describing how we're not going to hand any sheet music out, he has two people, assistants, standing behind him with stacks of music that just go, because their entire purpose, the whole reason they were there, just disappears. Why did I bring all this paper? Why did I tape it and copy it? It's like,
yeah,
it was pretty funny. And then walk up the stairs, and I think Driving Miss Daisy was the second thing on the rehearsal. So what you're talking about happened within 10 minutes after that conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And that moment was actually, I was finding out about it for the first time at that point too, because actually Hans had been trying to reach me the night before and started calling me at like 3 a.m. Now, normally I would be up at that time, but of course I had a concert the next day. And so my phone I was already asleep, and my phone was just like muting the calls from anybody. And so, but then when I got up on the day on concert day, I've got like countless unanswered phone messages from Hans Zimmer, and he, I was also then off to the hall to get to San Pedro in time, and we just met at the hall, and that was the point where he was unveiling this like mad scientist plan for what we were going to do to Driving Miss Daisy.
So now, after that year was done, what was our next collaboration after that? Was
after the shows did you have one more memory, or did we hit it?
No, actually, the memory Vic just told
was the Zimmer one.
Meeting Zimmer and going through all that. Yeah, we happen to have the same memory. That's another example of how we don't seem to disagree on things. we think the same.
So so we
even have the same barber.
So we had all those concerts in 2013. And then since I was part of all those shows that year, kind of took a year off. Mm-hmm. Not that I was like sitting with my feet up. I was producing 60 or so albums and doing concerts elsewhere in the world. But then we started somewhere in there. We started talking about doing something together again the following year. And could I come up with something for 2015?
Right.
And again, on one of my, I'd been like racking my brain thinking, okay, I need something that really doesn't, it incorporates elements of what we were doing, the idea of having special guests involved and a real emotional component to the show. And so I was thinking, well, what do we do? What's the basic what's the concept behind this next show? And then somehow there was something that happened I saw Back to the Future again, or something where I connected the fact that 2015 was the year in the original Back to the Future that Back to the Future 2 leaps to. And when they go into the future, and that actually marks then. So 2015 was going to be the 30th anniversary of Back to the Future, but not just Back to the Future. All of these great films and scores from that year, and then it was like this like epiphany where all of a sudden all the connections started happening, like just firing one after another, and I realized, wait a minute,
was this
1980?
Was this at one of your 3 a.m. in the middle of the night?
Yeah.
Hey!
Yeah. Or I think it was on a plane again. I think I think I was on a plane coming back from somewhere. And then I realized, wait a minute, 1985, Out of Africa, The Goonies, Silverado, Brazil. I mean, insane number of great scores. Jerry for Goldsmith, Rambo. I mean, just so many hits and blockbusters and beloved scores. And then I thought, well, yeah, I mean, how has that never been done before? Just focus on a single year and celebrate the great film music of 1985. So, once I had, once I convinced myself of the idea, I sketched it out and sent it to you, and you were like, let's do that. Yeah, that's the one. And then
another epic concert idea.
Yeah, I started, reaching out to composers, and it's like, okay, well, 1985 is a bunch of years ago, so we have lost a lot of composers, but we also still had a number of composers. So conducting as part of the show, Bruce Broughton conducted Silverado. David Shire, we actually had David Shire conduct Return to Oz. I mean, there was not a dry eye in the house after that one. And then I thought, well, to honor the composers who are no longer with us, let's bring kind of introduce and give opportunities to the next generation of young film composers who, for the most part, had not been involved in a lot of concerts of film music yet at that stage in their careers, because even the scores that they had written haven't elevated to classics yet. But so I had Joe Trapanese and Brian Byrne and Benjamin Volfish, and then also we had a great piece by John Corleano, prepared a special piece from his Revolution score, which comes from 1985, which he originally wrote for Sir James Galway, and he did a concert version for Sarah Andon. We had an original arrangement from John Corleano in that show, which Jeff Beal conducted, since John lives in New York. And I mean, just what a night, and just such a great celebration of
and on top of all of that, outside the venue, which was the Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center, for those that don't know, was a DeLorean.
Yeah, I think we had two DeLoreans.
I think there were.
And
there was one from the past and one from the future.
Yeah, and this was at the Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center, and just a beautiful night, and incredible atmosphere. I mean, what I really love too, I mean, a great example of just the community that we are part of is any of these concerts where we have 10, 20 or more composers. You would think, oh my goodness, that's going to be a nightmare. In reality, never. I mean, everyone is just so grateful to be part of it, happy to see film music being celebrated in that way, so supportive, and these backstage atmospheres behind these shows is just so warm, and makes me very happy to just see even composers that don't get to even, in many cases, even meet each other, to get to be part of the same show. And seeing Danny Elfman and Hans Zimmer walk out with their arms around each other at the May Gala. And,
well, Christopher Young, I think part of it too. These are, I mean, a composer's career asks for them to basically be in a room by themselves many, many hours a day.
Right.
So here they are being able to get out in public to promote a genre of music they love, their own music, to participate in the experience. And there's been so many times where Christopher Young has given me a hug and just said, you bring my music to life a second time, but this time it's live. And I think all of them they love that opportunity, especially in the case of a lot of these people when it's within an hour drive of where they live and they're right there.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so we get to do things because we're in Los Angeles that couldn't happen anywhere else in the world in this way.
Right.
And then also, I like to make a point of when I'm working on a concert. Of course, there's limited concerts. You can never do everything that you can dream up. But any concert opportunities, whether it's in Los Angeles or anywhere else in the world, I like to take advantage of the fact that I do have connections, in the music world that are unique to me. And so I want to really kind of run with that idea and take the most advantage of them. I mean, not advantage in a, overstepping your bounds, but just to make it, to take advantage of the history that you can achieve by involving people that other people don't have access to.
Right.
And just pulling all of that into a show and creating something that is so special and means as much to all of us that are part of the show on stage as it does to the people in the audience who get to experience it in that way. I mean, I think they can see in all of us how much fun we're all having on stage.
Right. Well, I know we have one more concert that we did at Royce Hall that we still need to talk about a little bit. But before we do that, there was a question from, it looks like it's a Jag 731. Where when we were talking about clearance to be able to create arrangements and things, and he mentions how, with having been affiliated with Varese, that must help things be a little bit easier to get the rights to the arrangements, and then also do approaching other labels help with producing the concerts. And one thing I want to say, and then you guys can jump in if you'd like as well. So there's different rights that are out there. Obviously, with work that Robert Townson has done through Varese and the years of being friends with these composers and the production companies and things, all of that network makes it easier to at least get your foot in the right doors and to get somebody to trust, hey, I want to create this arrangement, and for them to be like, yeah, that's perfectly fine, go ahead. But the record label itself, the license needed to create the arrangement, the record label doesn't have that license. They have licenses related to the recordings. The licenses we're talking about are copyright licenses for sheet music, so that the music can be printed and used by the musicians to be performed on stage in a live setting. That right is coming from the copyright holder, which Victor alluded to earlier. That's held by the production company who made the movie most of the time. So when we were talking about the licenses for these things, there's 3 different licenses in our business we talk about. One is recording license. One is arranging license, which is the copyright of the sheet music itself. And the third one is synchronization license, if we would like to show video footage while we perform the music. So all 2 or 3 of those are being negotiated at all times to help us figure out what the concert's going to be. Vic put his finger up. He either agrees or he wants to add something.
I wanted to add something. And this is really funny. We've heard a lot about this over the past couple of years with when we say copyright for sheet music, it's actually live performance license. There is a copyright for the sheet music, but what we're really looking for is a live performance license. And an interesting tidbit about that is live performance license doesn't necessarily mean that the players are live playing it. So, for example, if we take a recording of something and perform it live for the public, it can be like Yellow Submarine from the Beatles, their actual recording. If you play that in a public setting, that's called a live performance license. You need a live performance license for that. So anytime you hear music being played in a department store or whatever, that's all been cleared and permissed by the copyright holder. And the reason why I said we've heard about this over the last couple of years is a lot of times there's been some talk about political figures using songs for different venues and different things without getting clearance for it. That's actually a very big copyright infringement. It's not just that they're not paying their royalties for it or whatever. Technically, any live performance of any music, whether it be live performance of it by an orchestra of a piece of music or live performance of a recording that you didn't have anything to do with making, you have to give copyright permission for that from the copyright holders.
And that license also exists for virtual performances. So one reason you don't see a lot of orchestras right now some orchestras have been doing virtual performances if they can get the safety protocols taken care of because of COVID-19. But it's not just the safety protocols. They're actually paying the same kinds of license fees, musician fees, and everything as if that was a live concert. It's just being streamed. Even if they record it and then show it separately to all of the different affiliations, from the union to the license to the copyright holders, you're still doing a concert of some sort.
And yeah, correct. And then I would just add that, just to, verification is that for all of the pieces and concerts that I am part of and that we do together or that I do elsewhere, none of the rights in any way emanated for any of my music from the label itself. Nothing came from Varese Sarabande. It all came from the relationships that I formed over all those years, with people throughout the music industry, at the studios and the publishing firms and all of that. So it was my lifetime of relationships, but nothing to do with the label itself.
Exactly. Now, if we fast forward another couple of years, we ended up doing yet another collaboration. This time we shifted to Royce Hall. And why don't you tell us what that idea was and where it came from?
Well, so along with music, one of my great passion in life is great artwork. And specifically, I grew up at the same time I was discovering the music of Jerry Goldsmith through Star Trek: The Motion Picture. That movie also introduced me to the art of the great Bob Peak. And so a lifelong kind of obsession, fan level worship of Bob Peak's work. And I actually got to work with him and commission a portrait of Jerry Goldsmith years ago, back in 1988, for what was my third album production called Jerry Goldsmith Suites and Themes. And Bob Peak did an original painting for that cover. So I've got projects, and a specific project that involves his artwork, but that wasn't what led to the concert that we did. But it was the inspiration to what we did, which was an artist still, alive and working, iconic images that everyone in the world knows, the great Drew Struzan, who has done movie posters for just from Back to the Future and The Goonies, and some of the things that were even part of the 1985 show, but the Star Wars movies and Indiana Jones and just on and on, the Muppets, so many classic franchises as well, the Police Academy movies. He's just been working for decades and has done volumes of extraordinary work. And I had the idea of creating a concert that has a visual component that accompanies the entire music program, but does not emanate from the movies themselves, but becomes what I was calling a visual suite of the preliminary sketches, and then more developed composition, full color comp drawings, and then the finished paintings in each of these cases, and put together these visual suites that would accompany a performance of a suite from, or a song from, or a piece from any of these scores that Drew worked on, and then involve the composer, or if possible, to be there, or another special guest as a conductor, and do an entire show of music celebrating art and the art of Drew Struzan, with a group of composers and conductors there to help us facilitate that celebration. And it was so abstract that even up to the day itself of the concert, Drew himself didn't really realize what the show was going to be. And actually, I think I was standing with, Robert Folk and Brian Tyler, or somebody with Drew, during the dress rehearsal. And Drew said, to the guys, he said, well, he's very, self-effacing, very humble. He says, I think my artwork today is just an excuse to have a concert here.
Well, I remember telling you that until you sent me the first rough draft of, I think it was Raiders of the Lost Ark, or the Indiana Jones stuff was the first thing that I watched, where the slides, the pictures, the collage of images going by with the track playing, and I watched it, and I wrote back to you and I said, I never realized that this concept was going to make the music be a different experience than anything I've had before. We've had the experience of hearing the music while watching the movie. For many cases with the music that was on this concert, not all of them, but a lot of them, we've heard the music by itself, whether it be on the soundtrack or live in a concert someplace. But now putting this artistic imagery against it, even though that art was created for, in some cases, the promotion of the movie, it's a piece of art that's separate from the movie. And now it's being put against the music for the first time, and it made the music different. It brought out different elements.
Yeah, they transformed each other.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Austin afterwards, and he said, "I can't believe what I just saw." He said, "You just gave a performance of Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I heard that music like I was hearing it for the first time."
Yeah.
He said, "I cannot believe the feelings I just had in that show," and that really sums it up.
And I remember the agent, Richard Kraft, the film composer agent, after the concert, his comment to everybody on social media and everything was, "Last night I just witnessed the best film music concert I've ever been to."
Yeah, he said it was the greatest concert of film music, or greatest media concert I have ever experienced.
Well, and the proof was in the pudding at the end of the concert when we brought Drew up on stage to say a couple words, and he was so choked up he couldn't even speak.
Yeah,
he sat at the mic for a minute and couldn't get a word out.
Yeah, to gather himself.
That was an extremely emotional moment, and at the same time, it was an extremely stressful moment for me, because we have 2.5 hours to put on a concert, or else we go into overtime for the union. And when I walked over behind him for you to give him the award, there's a clock on the podium that he was speaking at, and there was about 15 minutes left on there. And I watched those minutes just dwindle, going, "Oh my gosh, we're going into overtime."
Well, and we still had the Star Wars. We still had the throne room and credits from Star Wars. But also,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I still had something else up my sleeve too, because Drew he was giving this beautiful speech once he collected himself, and then Drew was ready to walk away from the podium. I said, "Wait 1 second, Drew, one more thing here." I said, "A special friend of yours who really wanted to be here wasn't able to make it. He's filming a movie, but here's a special video he wanted to have us play for you." And I motioned to the screen, and a beautiful message from Steven Spielberg that he recorded just for that concert. And a thank you to Drew and his work and his life's contribution to the movies.
I'm just glad that I got to see that video ahead of time, because all I was thinking was, "Talk faster, Steve, talk faster, Steve," to Spielberg. And then when I looked back at the podium, I knew that by the time that video stopped, you were then going to gesture and say to me, "Take us away with the finale," which was Star Wars. And so I was walking to the podium in the dark. Well, when I left the podium, there was less than 7 minutes left. And I knew Star Wars was around 6 minutes, give or take. And I knew that on that night, it would be less than 6 minutes, because I was going to take everything slightly faster. I get on the podium, I conduct Star Wars. As I'm finishing it, only one thing was running through my mind. As you release the last note and have the orchestra finish, already be starting to step off the podium, because what a lot of people might not know is the clock for the musicians stops when the conductor steps off the podium. You can do encore bows for 1.5 hours and there's no overtime. It's just the conductor off the podium means the orchestra is done, and they technically can get up and leave if they want to. So when I stepped off afterwards, the contractor comes up to me and goes, "You made it by 10 seconds. And I was like,
And the other beautiful thing I remember about that evening is we had our first standing ovation for the concert within the first 5 minutes of the show, just when I introduced that Drew Struzan was in attendance. A standing ovation. extended standing ovation with the entire audience on their feet celebrating him, and then another huge ovation again like a minute later when I introduced that Colette Delarue was in attendance because we were going to be playing a piece of Georges that Brian Tyler was going to conduct that would accompany Drew's fine art paintings that had nothing to do with a movie per se, but we were including a piece of Georges Delarue's music to accompany that. And so we already had two big ovations, including a standing ovation, and we weren't even 5 minutes into the evening.
Now, these are all incredible concerts. And I'm looking at the clock, and we're about 17 minutes past the 9:15 mark that I said that we would try to get by, which for us I think is pretty good, that we're all still right around an hour and a half. So I think that's a good thing. But, these have been incredible concerts and, an incredible 18 years. And I know with COVID right now, we hope everybody is safe and we wish everybody well. But we're waiting for the time when we can get back on the stage. And earlier I mentioned that Star Wars and video games are some things that we're talking about. But Robert, I know that you had a little bit something that you wanted to say as well about the future in collaborating with us after COVID has moved on.
Absolutely. Well, of course, you and I were, we've stayed in touch, throughout this, just texting and
including, actually,
and,
I don't mean to interrupt, including, though, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, if I get it finished, a mega interview that I did with you for my Cookies and Coffee with Stephen on my YouTube channel. So for those of you, I'll do a shameless plug. Go to my YouTube channel, Maestro Fox, and there's interviews on there. And sometime in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be dropping one that's an interview with Robert. It's actually going to be, it's almost 2 hours worth of interview, so it's going to be cut into some different segments. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, no, that was a lot of fun, and so
what'd you say?
Stayed in touch for doing that, and then even starting to prepare for tonight's conversation. We're addressing we all know how much time it takes to build these concert programs and put things together. A concert might only take one evening to present. But in order to get to that one evening where everyone takes part, we've got a year sometimes or more of preparation to go into something. And in this era now, in this time we've luckily found ourselves in where thankfully a vaccine is being approved, and we are finally seeing a light at the end of this terrible COVID-19 tunnel that we've all been, that has just decimated arts agencies and orchestras all over the world, musicians. It's been crushingly sad to see the effects that it has had worldwide, of course, on our entire arts world. But of course, the world at large, in every walk of life, this has been a great tragedy. But seeing through to the brighter future that hopefully we all have ahead of us, and that the vaccine will make possible, I started thinking, well, let's give a grand reason to celebrate this return and come up with something very special, which we'll see when it actually happens. We've got some ideas of when that might be, but I won't get into that. But just to say, I did come up with something which I shared with Steve and Vic, and we were all instantly in agreement that this packs all of the emotional highs and musical highs that the previous collaborations have included, and it's a very special show that will have smiles and tears alike, with special guests, and I can't wait to prepare to stage this special evening with both of you and then the whole team when we finally get to do it.
Yeah, well, likewise, we're looking forward to working with you again on that, and getting back on the stage and making these things happen.
it's been a great ride, and the ride continues. The adventure continues for all of us. And as I said, just film music has been so neglected in from the concert halls and orchestras of the world historically for the entire history of film music as an art form, which is the entire body of work of all of these great composers we love and revere, has been so neglected from the worlds of concert presentation over all these years. And so there are mountains of great music that really deserve a much brighter spotlight and should be played and played again and played again. And we have a lot of work ahead of us, and I can't wait to get back to it with all of my great collaborators, in front of me and around the world.
Yeah, it's I totally agree. That's why the orchestra was started, and things have come a long way, but they still got a ways to go. So let's keep going down that path.
Absolutely.
And I thank both of you, Robert and Victor, for taking this hour and a half or so and reminiscing.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Why don't we, you remind the audience, or if they don't know about it, about our project coming up in a couple weeks here?
Yeah, definitely. It's actually next Thursday on December 17th at 6 p.m. in LA. That way, people across the country can have an easier time getting on and enjoying an hour or so. It's our Holiday Pops virtual event. We realized we can't be on the concert stage, but we wanted to do something related to the holidays. And so we have an event we put together that is going to have John Debney involved. And he and I are going to do a Q&A together and talk about his career and his work on holiday films. And then we're going to have the string quartet, Orchid Quartet, that will be a part of that. They're going to play some traditional music, and then they're also going to play some brand new arrangements, one done by one of the members, Molly Rogers, another one done by Vic, and an arrangement by myself of John Debney film music, holiday film music, for string quartet. They're going to premiere those in that event as well. And then there's a virtual wine tasting that if you'd like to, you can purchase it as an add-on. The wine gets shipped to you. It's actually today or tomorrow that is the deadline to sign up for that, to guarantee that you have it in time. So if that's something you're interested in, go to GSPO.com, and when you click on the Holiday Pops virtual event, the wine tasting information is there as the separate way to log in and buy that. The event is $20 per access code, one access code per device, plus a $5 service fee. So $25 total, and you can have the whole family sit around a screen, watch and enjoy that event for an hour, hear from a great composer like John Debney, enjoy some wine if you want to take part in that, and hopefully put you into a little bit of a holiday spirit. And in addition to that, starting on the 14th, for 12 days leading up to Christmas, I will be sharing through email and on social media a promo highlight of one of our previous Holiday Pops concerts, a few minutes of something from each concert, and I'll say a couple words about it before it is played, just to share some music along the way of things in the past and promote the kinds of stuff that we've done in the past. So hopefully you guys will enjoy and take part in both of those. But again,
that sounds fantastic. I just want to say John Debney has been so supportive of the GSPO and part of so many, I think almost all of the concerts that we have collaborated on as well. From the Principal Varese Gala, he conducted the Ant Bully. In the Christmas show, he conducted the Elf Suite. And then a special, he was over the moon about this. He conducted the world premiere of Bernard Herrmann's The Ghost and Mrs. Muir in concert in the Halloween show.
Yeah, he actually...
and Cutthroat Island in the Drew Struzan show.
John Debney actually has conducted the GSPO the second most amount of times, only second to me. That's how many times he's conducted this orchestra. And I've got to put this out there. John Debney, Brian Tyler, and unfortunately the late Craig Rogers, who was one of the largest supporters of this orchestra, the three of them are the financial reason that the Drew Struzan concert at Royce Hall luckily did not get canceled, because the ticket sales at the point, there's a certain time prior to the concert that the venue must receive a certain amount of money, and it was supposed to come from ticket sales, which by that date, they had not brought in enough through the ticket sales to pay whatever that fee was. And they called me and said, you have 24 hours to raise, it was a huge amount of money, or else we're going to cancel the concert. I contacted a handful of people, and between Craig Rogers, John Debney, and Brian Tyler, they paid it off. So a huge thank you, shout out goes to the three of them, because otherwise all the incredible work that we all did and the incredible concept and an idea and work you put into it, it would have just disappeared in front of us because of something that, would have been totally unfortunate. So I greatly thank, and that's just an example of how much the support from people like everybody who is watching that are our biggest supporters for this orchestra, they're the reason that it happens. Well, that's a direct example. The supporters of this orchestra are what make it possible. And so, without all of you who are watching, we would not be sitting here right now talking about these 18 years worth of concerts. So Robert, Victor, thank you very much for joining me this evening and making it so special. And thank you everybody for watching. Hopefully you've learned a little bit and had a little bit of fun as we went through the evening. Again, next week, the John Debney Holiday Pops virtual event with Orchid Quartet. We really hope that you'll participate. It's all at gspo.com. And other than that, please be safe. And we will see you hopefully very soon back in the concert stage. Thank you for watching.